Here's something that's got me thinking. I was reading this morning about the history of Israel in Second Kings. Now, if you know the history a little bit, you know that after King Solomon, the country was divided, and the southern tribes were called Judah, and the northern tribes were called Israel. Neither Judah nor Israel had a great track record as far as their leadership goes, but Israel especially seemed to have king after king that took the people farther and farther away from God. And so this morning I read this passage from 2 Kings 14 that says, God saved Israel by the hand of Jeroboam. Now, what isn't surprising to me is why God did this. Quite simply, the first part of the verse says God wanted to do this. He already said that he was going to save Israel. The surprising part to me is the way that he chose to do it. He chose to do it through this king named Jeroboam. Why that's surprising to me is just a couple of verses earlier, we read about how evil Jeroboam was, how he was continuing the process of taking people farther and farther away from God. And yet God chose to use Jeroboam so that God could accomplish his plans. You see, God is sovereign. His plans always stand. He will use whatever means necessary to accomplish his plans. So here's what I've been thinking about then. Just because God may use me to do something amazing is not an indication of the righteousness in my heart. Jeroboam was used by God to bring about a great victory, but Jeroboam was an evil man. And so that reminds me again how often that I need to pray that prayer that David had as he closed the 139th Psalm, where he said, Search me, O God, know my heart, see if there is any offensive way in me. Just because God uses you doesn't necessarily mean that you are without sin. Maybe you should pray that prayer.